and we will share the link with you afterwards. Next slide. Here is our agenda. Welcome and introduction. I'm doing that now. We'll go into a bit more information on AI and the environment, some practical uses of AI, how it's used for learning and development, and how you can be a responsible user of AI. We'll wrap up. Next slide. Next slide. So today, here are the expected outcomes of the session. Like last time, I think you'll see and learn some practical applications for how you can use it as WASH practitioners. We'll talk more about the environmental impact of AI, and this is something that a lot of you submitted questions on before, and we'll share ideas and questions together as a group. This is the second session in our series, so we're going to build on the introductory session and dive in a little bit deeper. So make sure if you submitted a question, you listen carefully, and this is your chance also to ask follow-up questions and get more information from our colleagues. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Baobab team, and I think Solène or Olivier, whichever of you is going first, please hop on the mic.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Solène from Baobab Tech, as Alex said. I am in charge of partnerships at Baobab Tech. So I take care of making, creating, and maintaining relationships with different NGOs, different private sector companies as well, in order to create knowledge partnerships in the sector. We try to have Thank you. We try to have different partners within the sector in order to make WASH AI, which is an AI made for and by WASH workers, maybe development and humanitarian staff, to make it inclusive, to make it diverse, and to make it representative of the diversity in the sector. Chai-Wei, unfortunately, is not with us today, but she's taking care of localization for Baobab Tech. She's an amazing human being that I hope you will get to know in other sessions. And I am unsure whether Olivier has been able to join us. I know he had some tech issues, which is quite ironic as we're talking about AI today. I'm sure he'll be able to
Here he
join us a
comes
bit
right
later
now.
on. Amazing, perfect timing.
Sorry
Olivier,
about
the
that.
floor is yours.
Thank you. Apologies. I had major internet 5 minutes before the meeting. So I am tethering off my phone. So if the quality is poor, just ping me and then I'll see what I can do. Good morning, everybody. And we've done intros, I hope. Is this the intros or are we jumping right in, just the intro?
Yeah, just introducing
Yeah,
ourselves.
so I don't know if for those who were there in the first session, but for those who weren't, I'm Olivier Mills. I'm the founder of Baobab Tech. And Baobab Tech, our goal is to try and make the best use of AI within the social space and social environmental space. And so it's about 3 years old now, and we're really primarily looking at, I guess, the new parts of AI, not the old parts. So a lot in the generative AI space. I have a background in WASH, in water and sanitation, having been a technical advisor for various organizations over the past, I guess, couple of decades now. And yeah, fully moved into tech, I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, but have been running a tech company for the past 10.
We created a small Menti poll for you all to share 2 different information. Firstly, if you do use generative AI tools, to let us know which one you use. I will share the link in the chat for those that cannot scan, the QR code, and also what you use it for. And this will help us kind of understand where you're at in your use of AI. Absolutely no shame if you don't use AI, please. That is not a problem at all. We're really just trying to get to know you better and get to know your use of AI so we can also adapt the presentation. I see on the results that there's 3 people using ChatGPT the most, might not be the only one, but most. And one Gemini, 2 Gemini, 1 Claude, 1 other. Interesting. For the people that are voting for the other option, feel free to share in the chat if that's okay, what tool you use. Interesting in knowing what are the tools you might be experienced with. And then if you maybe you might not be able to go into the second question, which is what you use it for. Maybe we can wait a minute for everyone to get the opportunity to vote. We have 12 votes for now. And there's about 30 of you in the session.
What are we seeing in the other? Did anyone put in the chat? Sorry, I got
Saying grok.
Not yet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, I have my opinion. Grok is the AI model developed by the individual who shut down the humanitarian sector. So this is the X.com, formerly Twitter. So they built their own AI. So I don't necessarily recommend it for ethical reasons. It's not even a good model, even. So it's got a lot of hype because of the individual behind it, Elon Musk. But I don't necessarily recommend it.
Yeah,
but it is
Olivier,
available. Yeah.
it's being pushed by some AI influencers, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, we should. There's a
Yeah.
lot of yeah, and
I
that's
think
also
that
why we
in the
do these
tech,
sessions. And
you know, in
yeah.
the tech market especially, it's very male dominated, and I follow
Oh
some
yeah.
of these folks on LinkedIn, and they push it. So I'm sure there's
Yeah,
influence
and
there.
we see that as well in even in the tooling. So when they give, for examples, tools and examples of applications, they give like they'll use Grok or they'll use OpenAI as an example of application when they could use anything else. But so that's also part of that influencer experience. So
Right.
maybe
You
we can
should be
shift to
able to vote
next.
on the second question now. Yeah.
I've never used this kind of graph, so hopefully it'll work. The intention here is you voted based on like how frequently you do a certain task, and the volume is like the amount in a day. So like you use it every day versus using it maybe occasionally, and then the volume is like the amount of time you use it every day. I'm not seeing much votes. Maybe there's
Actually, I might not have access to it. I'm trying to. Oh, yeah, there you are. Perfect.
Yeah, I was testing out this this kind of graph. Not sure if this is the right one for this question. Yeah, as expected, lower use of image generation, which is not a bad thing.
And we
With
did not
volume, what do I mean
question
with
video generation, although we'll be tackling it later.
yeah, video image generation. Volume is for example, when I think of you know, I will use it significantly during the day. So kind of the amount of I'd say questions you would ask in the chat concept. You'll do 4 or 5 chats in a day. Frequency is like, oh, like once a week, once a month, or very occasionally. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because I think we see a lot of image generation, and I'm glad it's more the hype than the actual use.
Okay, I think we can hop into the next slide and dive into our presentation. First part, as Alec said, is about the environmental impact of AI, and we can hop onto the next. Yeah, perfect. I wanted to introduce you a bit with some numbers and some information regarding how today we can measure the environmental impact of AI. Spoiler alert, we cannot completely measure the impact of generative AI today for different reasons, which we'll dive into. But this introduction is more generic, and then I'll give you some information regarding US numbers especially. And then after that, we'll question ourselves exactly how does one inquiry to a chat box actually, represent in terms of energy consumption. So the energy requirements for data centers actually remain quite flat between 2005 and 2017. But then when large language models arrived in 2017, the energy intensive hardware designed for AI led to doubling the electricity consumption by 2023 as of today. And as we know already, most of the environmental impact of generative AI and language models is linked to the cooling of data centers operations. So the data centers, they function with servers, right? And those servers, they need to keep their GPUs, the graphics processing units, which are electronic circuits that can perform mathematical calculations. They need to keep them cool. I mean, if they don't, then they don't function at all. So for them not to overheat, they need to have constant, fans running and a very, very high and heavy usage of water, which is actually often potable, drinkable water, to run to keep the temperatures low. So this consumption fluctuates, of course, based on the location of the data center, the size of the model of the generative AI, also the specificity of the model. If it is a multi-purpose model, then it will need more energy compared to task-specific models. And if you were there, the first session we organized a month ago now, it was one of our recommendations, right? To make sure that you use and that we all use a model that's fit for what we need it to do, because if we tend to use much larger models, then our environmental impact will be much heavier for absolutely no reason. So today we know that ChatGPT is the 5th most visited website in the world, right after Instagram and before X. And knowing this, and also knowing that models will probably be more personalized with time, that the numbers of data centers in the world will increase, that the amount of AI usage will increase both for personal and professional reasons, and that investments are skyrocketing, we can only project that we are running towards a much heavier use of AI, so a much heavier energy consumption in the future. If we go into the next slide, we'll be looking into the example of the US. So today, 4.44% of the overall energy usage goes towards data centers, which is quite huge. There are about 3,000 data centers in the US alone. On the map, you can see which are the operational existing data centers in green, and then in pink, the ones that are planned. And at the very bottom, you can see the asterisk, which explains the different levels of development of those new data centers. And most of them rely heavily on fossil fuels because they need constant power every day of the year. They cannot rely on wind and solar power alone. They need exactly the same power throughout the day and the night, maybe winter or summer. And very large groups such as Meta, Amazon, and Google have joined together a pledge to triple the world's nuclear capacity by 2050 to kind of leave their dependence of fossil fuels and rely instead of on nuclear power. Today, we're very far from that. So they're projecting, but we're not sure if we'll get there on time. And I don't know if you've heard about it, but actually in April of this year, we've observed a huge violation of energy regulations in Elon Musk's X supercomputing center. So, I mean, because of the whole regulation around the Clean Air Act, we could tell, thanks to satellites, that actually their center was not respecting those norms at all. So we're really confronting ourselves between a huge demand of, for those data centers to exist and to run and function on a daily basis, and actually what we can do with what we have right now in the legal frame that we have. So it's quite complex. And actually at the bottom of this slide, you see the source of this graph. Well, actually, where I got this graph, but the graph is from somewhere else. But it's a very interesting and recent article that came out. It's called "We Did the Math on AI's Energy Footprint." Here's a story you haven't heard. I highly recommend you take the time to read it. It's very interesting. It's super easy to read, even though you're not a tech person, you'll understand everything, which I'm really thankful for. And yes, it's very US centered, but it gives a pretty good image of where we're at and what we might be missing in the current model. So if we go into the next slide, we'll see that actually we're in a very opaque system in order to understand the environmental impact of our inquiries we might do on different models. So you can see on the graph that the environmental impact transparency of different AI models has fluctuated. So you see the direct and indirect transparencies in blue and green is a very, I mean, the green especially is a very minor part of the overall transparency. A lot of models still do not share that information. I don't think this will be of surprise to any of you, but yes, the generative AI world and its environmental impact is very opaque. We don't know which data center in the world processes a request. We don't know how much energy it takes it to do so and how carbon intensive the energy sources is. This is information that's only known by the companies that run the model, so they decide whether they want to make it open or not. And this is the difference between closed source models and open source models. But open source models exist, and they're actually the best option to get an estimation of the environmental impact, although we won't be able to generalize because they're not a majority of the models that exist nowadays. So we're going to look into the queries sent to chatbots, but please be reminded that, as we said actually in the first session last month, queries are built in lots of applications that we use on a daily basis through apps and online shopping, agents, booking flights, and all kinds of things. So we're really going to be looking into generative AI, but not all types of queries. If we go into the next slide, so the different graphs I'm showing here are from a paper that's actually mentioned at the very end, yes, of the slide, written by 4 researchers. And we wanted to share with you these 2 figures on the environmental impact transparency again of LLM usage. And it's information because it's interesting, sorry, because the information we had on environmental impact peaked in 2022. And then when actually the launch of ChatGPT happened, it triggered a reversal in this trend with, I mean, that reduces the direct environmental disclosures. And now we get into more and more opaque models that we don't really have information on. The second figures is actually interesting also because it looks into something that we often hear, which is that a request to ChatGPT consumes 10 times more energy than a Google search. And in this paper, it actually is quite critical about that because it's from information that dates back from 2009, I believe, on the impact of a Google search. And it really depends on the model you use. It really depends on the prompting you do. It depends on all types of things. And it's kind of hard, and it wouldn't be very realistic to generalize a ChatGPT or a generative AI search like that. So it's something to take with a pinch of salt, maybe. Next slide, please. Amazing. Maybe very quickly, I don't think I'll have time to show you how it works, but if you scan the QR code, or if you, I'll try to paste the link in the chat. Here is a great website that helps you understand what is the environmental transparency of a specific organization. So if you log on it, you can decide, you can choose which organization to use. Thank you, Olivier. Which organization to look into, and you will have the data. Yes, exactly. Thanks. By year. So super interesting. OpenAI, of course, for ChatGPT, but all kinds of, you've got lots of universities, all kinds of companies on there. So feel free to play around with that, and maybe we'll help you, decide and choose which AI to use on a daily basis. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So we still want to know, right? Kind of the amount of energy that it takes to run an inquiry. We're going to be looking at three models very quickly. First one is about generating text. Second models are about for generating images, and the third one is for videos. So for the first, and this is all from the article that I mentioned a bit earlier, which is at the bottom of the slide. For the text generation models, they looked into two models, a very small one from Meta, and then a very large one, still from Meta. It's a Llama one. You have the exact model on the screen. The first one, the small one, had 8 billion parameters, and an query sent to this model is estimated to use about 114 joules, which is the metric that is used to understand the energy consumption. So this includes the GPUs that I talked about earlier, but also all the cooling systems around its use, the computations and everything. To give you maybe a more concrete understanding of what it means, it's about the same energy that you would need to run your microwave for about 1/10 of a second. Now, if you send exactly the same inquiry into the largest model, you get 50 times more parameters. And for your information, the parameters are not even made transparent when you're looking into closed source models. So these are all open source models. We wouldn't be able to know this information if they were closed. And for this very large model, the estimated joules is about 6,700, which is much more than the first one. So that would be about the same than running a microwave for 8 seconds instead. So what we observe here is that the model size is a huge predictor of the energy demand, right? Because it runs on much more chips and GPUs, and also that the prompting is a huge factor because a simple prompt would use on average 9 times less energy than complicated prompts. It was actually one of the points from the first session we did last month, is that it really is interesting and smart to teach yourself how to prompt before using AI. Also, I mean, especially from an environmental point of view, but also for, the time consumption. If you make sure that you, contextualize your prompt, that you give it enough information for the AI to give you a complete, critical prompt output, sorry, that will really answer your prompt, then it's really interesting to do so. And if we look into models that generate images instead of text, the research looked into the Stable Diffusion 3 medium model, which is one of the leading open source image generator. The amount of parameters is about 2 billion, so much smaller than the smallest model of text generation. And the estimated energy use is of 2,200 joules. So it's less than the largest text model, but larger than the small one. And here it's interesting because the image generation models does not depend on prompting, and the energy use of the model does not depend on prompting. It's exactly the same amount of energy that it used from an image to another. It really depends on the size of the model instead. And if we look now at the video generating models, I will not try to pronounce the name of the model, but you have it there. The energy use is about 3.4 million joules, so much more than the rest, only for a 5-second long video. So this would be about the same energy consumption than running your microwave for over an hour. So here you have a bit of numbers and concrete example of what it means environmentally to prompt your AI. We learned that larger and multi-purpose models are more energy intensive compared to task-specific models. And also, again, this is all information disclosed by tech companies that do open source models. So it is not enough probably to make reasonable projections for the future and to really understand where we're at today, but it's still a bit to understand how it works. So maybe before I give the floor to Olivier, we can hop onto the last slide of this part. I wanted to ask you all your estimation. You can write it in the chat. How many messages do you think that ChatGPT receives per day? So really any inquiry, how many do you think they receive? It's okay if your estimation is completely overestimated or underestimated. Shoot a number.
That's by everyone in the
And
world, right?
yes,
Yeah, not just
global
not
use
just
of
them. Global
ChatGPT.
usage of ChatGPT.
Right. Per day.
Messages per day.
Mm-hmm. See, 1
Like
billion as a
the bid is up
10 billion.
10 billion.
Yes. Any other estimation before I give the correct
Wow.
answer? All right, so ChatGPT receives 1 billion messages per day. And if we, again, I mean, it's a closed source model, so we don't exactly have the numbers, but if we base it on a medium-sized model, that's about 109 gigawatt hours of electricity that is used every day. So the amount of messages received by ChatGPT per day leads to the same energy consumption than what it would mean to power 10,400 US homes for a whole year, just to give you a bit of a image of how much energy is used here. So I think we're done with the AI environmental impact part. I'll give the floor to Olivier to look into the practical use of AI. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it was important. We wanted to start with this topic because it's really an interesting and hard space to be in right now in terms of trying to balance the environmental impact of our actions within an opportunity space as well. We are seeing opportunities for AI to hugely change the way, have better impact, be more effective in our work, be more efficient and effective in other ways. It's challenging for an AI company like the one we have here with Baobab Tech is to try and see where that balance lies and help support you in responsible use is the best way to put it. It's really hard to compare to other industries. It's like saying, I'm not going to drive today. I'm going to walk instead. I'm going to reduce my meat consumption. There's a lot of actions we can take, and this is going to be a big one. This is going to be a huge one where you can decide as a user what actions you can take to reduce your impact. It's really hard to control what's happening in big tech right now. It is a very violent race towards the top, towards ownership of the market. And so it's really up to us as users to determine when's the best time to use AI or not. So to get onto some of the more practical uses and some of the opportunities and spaces that we can leverage, in the last session, we presented these sort of common tasks that you're probably already using AI for. And what I wanted to do is dig in a little bit, and we won't have time to go through all the opportunities, but I wanted to kind of throw at you some of the opportunities that exist. And I've divided them in two spaces. And today we'll focus on the second space, but I still wanted to give you examples. If we can go to the next slide, there's a lot of text on the screen, and I apologize for the other languages. So I went through a lot of different examples, and I kind of like reduced it down to about 20 different sub use cases of productivity tasks within generative AI. And so I'll give you a minute to read some of these and maybe think of how you can do things differently. The reason I want to look at this is because we're in this weird, I wouldn't call it a honeymoon phase, but this weird phase of AI where a lot of the usage is to give you the answers, to do the work for you. Some of the recent studies around the cognitive impact of using AI has shown quite negativity towards really diminishing our cognitive functions because we're just giving the task to AI. And instead, there are opportunities to use it to actually increase our focus and be more creative, be more reflective. And so in some of these, the productivity tasks are going to be very solution focused, but sometimes they can help us think about things more rather than just do the work for us. One of my favorite ones are around ethical dilemmas, debates, and discussions. So I'll have the AI look at things from different angles. I think one that's not in here, but it might be in the next one. It's around persona management as well. So like having it balance different personas and look at things from different personalities, different some things that, you know, like a critical friend, we call that approach as well. So yeah, have a look at some of these. There's a lot more ideas out there. Maybe help you rethink to really be very intentional around using AI rather than just making it do the work for you. On the and I'm just looking at time. I won't jump into this. I can give you. I want to just give you some example. There's been questions around, can I use things for like data quality analysis or like purely production analysis tools? So I'm just going to share a screen quickly to show you some productivity usages. Make sure you can see. So I'm not going to be using OpenAI or Grok. So for example, yeah, I can use Claude. Everyone on which tool to use, I honestly can't tell you that one is better than the other, to be truly honest. All I can tell you right now is that Mistral has better data centers in low carbon spaces. Claude is quite performant, yet they've had their own issues with legal use of copyright information. Honestly, you're working with the least worst. But what I wanted to show you was an example of a specific application for in the image recognition. So image recognition is different than image generation. So when you paste an image and you ask AI to look at an image, that image is converted into tokens equivalent of text. Images are generally not more than about 600 tokens. So when you paste an image in, it's like writing 500 words. So it's processing 500 words, which is very, very different than generating an image. So you're still within the text generation space and it uses much less energy. But one interesting example is I wanted to show you, for example, for analysis and helping me understand what's going on. I'm not going to give it the text here, but I am, can you see me switch between tabs, hopefully? So I'm pasting a Petri dish for we're in water quality, so I think this is appropriate. What is this? Explain. Is a way to, for example, test its internal knowledge. It's not doing any web search because a lot of AI models can't do web search for you, and from an image perspective yet. So they can search for text right now. You can see it's not performing any web search, but in this case, it's looking at this. I didn't say it was in the context of water quality. If I say it's in the context of water quality like this, then we'll see if it can actually recognize. Of course, it says, yes, this is because I told you, come on. So it is starting to recognize that even it's actually recognizing this properly as blue bing E. coli. So what you can see is that it's not like anyone who works in water quality knows very well. This is an M. coli blue plate for E. coli testing for bacterial contamination. But AI is still very hesitant, etc. So non-specialized AI can still get there if you push it, but not necessarily the best to dive into the subject matter. Even this is the latest version of Claude 4 Sonnet, so it's a very capable model. So keep in mind that when you start using it for very focused particular tools that and in specific domains like water and sanitation, that it will be limited in its capabilities. So that's just a quick productivity use example when you're working in specific domains. In the next slide, I wanted to dig in. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking at Rémi's point. Absolutely. Rémi makes an excellent point for bias, and we can talk about that. I'm actually going to jump into that example to show you that because it is worth it. And not knowing what you don't know. So if I just say, actually, so I've already said it's, and this is suggesting that it's from a, you're absolutely right, consider it. And so I very much doubt that you would do stool sample testing. A stool sample testing will not show like that on a dish because you don't do it that way. So it's really trying to please me here when I say, what if this is a medical lab, like suggested by me? It really pushes its generation towards, okay, I'm going to try and figure a way to make this idea work because you suggested it was a medical lab. So it's going deep towards its prediction, and it's going really far down the line around trying to figure out what that is. And that's something to keep in mind when you're prompting, is that if for whatever reason you're giving it an indication or something else is telling you to go in a different direction, the language models are still trained and aligned to try and get closer to what you're suggesting. So your suggestiveness in your prompting, it, like, really biases, like, hard turns in towards the language model going down the path that you're trying to get it to go down, which in some cases is good, because you want to, if you're trying to make it generate a certain output in a certain way, like you want bullets instead of paragraphs and things like that, then it's useful to have that the LLM is listening to you, quote unquote, and trying to go down your path of direction. But from a topical and research, its own critical analysis approach is highly limited. It's highly skewed. And there's another study I can share in the link that was done around this idea that we're starting to try and realign language models to just simply say, I'm not sure, or actually, no, I think you're wrong. Like, which is what I would want it to say here, and be like, nope, that's an MCALI blue plate. That's for water quality testing. I'm like, so sure. So like, let's not go down this other path. We're not there yet. Language models are still puppies that are trying to please you. So keep that in mind. So the learning tasks, this one I find more interesting. I think in the space where we have a lot of individuals who are sort of getting into the water and sanitation space, or learning a new career, or getting into trying to understand a lot of topics. I wanted to present some ideas around how we can use AI to help learn. Now, this comes with a big caveat around this domain expertise. Within very niche areas, we want to be very careful in relying on the language model's internal training knowledge to give you things, give you answers. That said, a lot of the language models right now are quite good in basics in a lot of technical areas of expertise, surprisingly good in a lot of the areas. And I would not rely on it to go really deep into very niche topics, be it in water and sanitation, in management, in behavioral research and things like that. But in general topics, it is quite performant. And so what I wanted to show you here is examples on how you would use it for learning. Scenario-based learning, present a scenario involving and ask me how to handle it. So a common approach to learning tasks is to have it ask you questions back. Role-playing, interactive tutorials, scenario-based learning, and there's examples of prompts, very, very simple prompts here. You want them to be more extensive than that. Give me exercises, for example, to improve my data analysis skills related to water quality. Again, what you might want to do, so this is number 8 here in skill development. You might want to attach, for example, a syllabus. So you might want to attach a water quality manual to that question, and then have it generate examples or have it generate questions against that. So you might have access to a water quality training manual. You can paste that in there and then have it generate questions for you to test your knowledge. So again, rather than using AI just to give you answers for everything, you're going to find yourself developing a dependency on it so much that you're not going to be useful to the world. And so I highly always recommend that you use it for training. You can learn so much with it. Again, what I would always recommend when you're asking it to let you do exercise or scenario-based exercises is to put together resources that you can then provide to the language model. And what that means is, for example, in the case of like the work we were doing around the environmental impact, I can give you an example of how you can collate tools. And so what I always do is, so for example, here, I will collate a bunch of documentation. This could be manual content, this could be articles, this could be something, and I literally just dump it in a Word file, in a doc file, things that will be useful. Some cases, this might be training manual information. It could be things like that. And then, so what then I would then do with this, and this could be anything that you want to generate questions with. Let's use some Mistral. And so I'm going to turn off web, I'm going to turn off some tooling, but we might say, as a tutor and create questions back and forth, testing my knowledge on environmental AI, environmental impacts of AI, only using the information above. I say but above, this, it's a slight nuance in how you prompt. Always start with a lot of the text and then put your task at the end, like this. So I'm going to paste what you saw there from that Word doc. Tons of information about environmental impact on AI. And so there we are. It's going to go me through what are the environmental impacts associated, particularly language, I don't know, ecological destruction. And then there we go, it jumps into, so it's immediately developed a tutor. I just put one quote and we're jumping into question 2. Obviously it's being very kind, that was not the right answer. It is really building on the information that was in there. So this will guide you through a few back and forths question on it, literally based on a curated content. That is very different. If I hadn't dumped all that information and I just asked it to give me questions here, then it would rely on its internal knowledge, which is really what I want to do. I want it to rely on knowledge that I give it. So we'll share with you some of these. The next slide gives you more specific questions that, sorry, next one. Different approaches on how you can use it for learning. The classic one as well is flip the script. So ask me questions like it's basically similar to this one. I like this one because it's like questions like a classmate I'm explaining the concept to. So it's getting you into that human interaction. Honestly, instead, talk to a peer, don't use AI. Do this with a peer, with a human. In absence of the human, you can use AI, but my first step would be, call up a friend and do this exercise with them rather than with AI. But this is, again, we're in an AI session here, so I just wanted to give you that example. Next slide. I've collated, again, we'll share these slides with you. I've collated with you some really good type of prompts that can help you get started in different, both technical and non-technical areas of WASH that you might find useful. And again, I've worded these prompts in a way that are hopefully a bit more effective in using AI. For example, critique my funding proposal, role play, challenge me with technical questions, act as an audience of engineers judging my presentation skills, and then next slide. So I've tried to give you examples across different areas, partnership, regulatory frameworks. So that's a good example. I'm studying regulatory framework, compliance frameworks. In this case, I would say, paste in a whole bunch of specific compliance frameworks if you have access to the original text for this, rather than relying on its general knowledge. So if you have those documents, you can attach them and then ask your main instruction here, like I'm studying regulatory frameworks, quiz me on what if scenarios. So again, giving it the knowledge and the domain you want it to focus on. I think that's it. I might have another slide of examples, but if not, we can shift over. So we couldn't go through each one, but we'll share those slides with you because of time.
Great. Thank you. Yes, we do want to keep some time for a live Q&A. So I will go through a bit fast, but we will share those slides with you. And actually, this information here on this slide regarding what could go wrong with the use of generative AI was shared during the first session, and the recording is online. So I don't want to go through all of them. But here are some examples of, things to keep in mind when you prompt and when you use your AI. There are different types of biases. You need to make sure that when you take into account the prompt, you imagine some types of criticism that could be missing, some exceptions that could be missing in the examples that are listed by the AI. So these are just some examples of, the pitfalls that could happen with the use of AI. Next slide, please. Here are 6 steps that we also shared during the first session to try to limit, the negative impact of using generative AI in your work. It goes from a very simple question, but asking yourself whether you actually do need AI for this. Most of the time, we can rely on peers, we can rely on friends, we can rely on our own knowledge or the information from our own organization. So if it's, if you can do without, we strongly, recommend to do without if you can get complete answers without generative AI. So it goes from this to once if you've decided to use your generative AI, then imagine try to measure the environmental impact of the different models that are available. Try to also be critical regarding which model to use based on the task you need it to do, and take into account the different risks and impacts of this model, especially for the task you're trying to do. We know that the risk is very low if you're doing very bureaucratic, tasks, but then the risks are much heavier if you're doing decision making, for instance. And then again, the importance of good prompting. I don't say it enough, but it's important. It's necessary to be critical of this too. And then once you get the output, as Olivia said, we need to be critical of this output too. And as you already know, if you're using a free tool, it probably means that you're giving away your data. So it's also important to make sure that the model you use has your consent for any data it might be using. For the last slide of this part, and before we hop onto the Q&A, or actually no, Olivier will be taking the floor back right after this one. But as he previously mentioned, when testing AI with the E. coli picture query, LLM are still puppies that want to please us. And even though we love puppies, we need to be careful because we know the risk of, surrounding ourselves with people or media that are, think the same as us or say exactly what we want them to say. Is the same with AI. We need criticism. We need transparency regarding errors and bias. And this is what we're trying to do here is really take this into account and make sure that we understand the simultaneous risks and opportunities of AI. We know that it offers unprecedented capabilities, but that it also creates challenges such as promoting disinformation, correlating its outputs with behavioral changes, and also threaten media credibility. So maybe the conclusion of this responsible use part is that generative AI intensifies existing inequalities and biases because it's made from human-made information data and trained by humans. And we need to be smart and make sure that we're not lazy. And it's actually, maybe we can share the LinkedIn post, Olivier, about this. It's a very interesting post regarding the fact that we need to make sure that we cherish and keep our human creativity and that we rely on our brains for creative tasks, because if we lose the craft, then this will have a huge impact on thinking as well. So maybe a bit of food for thoughts that we'll share in the chat. And back to you, Olivier, for the last couple of slides before the Q&A.
Yeah, I just wanted to very briefly show you. So MIT has got an AI risk repository where they're trying to capture the incidences. And this is just, we're taking a bigger step back here on seeing what AI is impacting on society. And so this one just basically classifies the risks and the incidents, anything from toxicity to disinformation and maluse. So it's on the MIT repository, link in the slides. You can have a look. It's not fully up to date. It looks historically, but still very interesting to start to see kind of where the world is shifting. And like we said, the biggest space, honestly, being toxicity, misuse of AI, and misinformation. Even though AI could be used for the opposite, it's being used for not necessarily the right reasons. Next. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I skipped a slide, Selene. That was another one that I had, but we didn't have time. So did we want to do, before we jump onto the poll, go ahead, Selene, I'll let you guide this Q&A.
That's all right. I was actually going to mention the Menti polls, but I think we do have some questions in the chat already. I did not see the Q&A functionality on Zoom.
I don't know if we've got Q&A working. I don't think it's being turned on.
Yeah, we don't have Q&A
Okay,
on
that's
the
fine.
meeting
We can use
function.
the chat.
Olivia, I think you've been responding kind of
I have,
in time.
yes.
Remy had a question recently. I think
Yes.
it's about MS365 Copilot.
Yeah, so one of the questions here in the chat from Remy is AI for work, and there's kind of big challenges these days. mostly around two things. One is just the idea of privacy of documents, and then secondly, also kind of being what we call vendor locked in. So we're kind of stuck with a specific vendor that your organization is working with. And so that is a challenge. I think, generally you want to avoid using free tools to upload documents and information like that. If you are paying for a service, understand where that data is going and understand the data governance rules of your organization. For example, some organizations who are operating out of Europe don't want any of their data to go outside of Europe. And so if that's the case, then you might want to make sure you're using the right tools for that. I have my own feelings about being vendor locked in with Microsoft. A lot of nonprofits are, because of their IT departments, have just decided to stay with Microsoft. Obviously, then what happens is that the IT department will push Microsoft Copilot, MS365, just because it's easier for them to deploy those AI tools. They are definitely not the best tools, and I know that because I'm working directly with organizations implementing and related to tools with them. But they are the default, and so I think there is a space for you to push back and to say that you're not comfortable working with those tools, either because they're not good or because you're not comfortable with the ethics of that company. There are tools out there that you can use. You can implement. For example, I mean, the reality is you don't have much of a choice with the large language models, so you've got to pick the least evil, to be truly honest. But you can implement. Within the Google space, you can implement with Mistral, directly connecting to the Mistral data LLM in Sweden. There are options, but I think it requires a bit of informing the organization you work with. And I'm trying to influence organizations as well to show them that the other options do exist. It does get a little bit technical in terms of the options, but there are options out there. And yes, and Microsoft they're all just trying to lead the market, right? So they're really pushed for charities. They took off the charity pricing, and then they sort of decided to give free seats, and they're trying to give discounts and things like that. And but just keep your options open. I was very delighted to see a couple of governments have ditched Microsoft completely in terms of not using them at all, Teams and Copilot. So it's exciting to see people are truly acting on their agency in the options that are out there.
Maybe I can answer Sherazad's question. Yeah. Maybe we can also show the slide of the Menti poll so people can enter their votes while I answer. That's on the next slide. Amazing, thanks. Yes, I'll answer in English just to make sure that the interpretation and everything goes well, because we had some technical issues in the first session. So sorry, I'm answering in English even though you asked your question in French. I hope that's okay. Happy to translate on the chat if needed. But yes, AI data centers, they're massive water consumers. It's not a surprise to any of us. The numbers we know is that 1 megawatt used means about 26 million liters of water used annually. So to give you maybe a sense of understanding, the Google's data center average about 2.1 million liters of water per day. And as I said earlier, that's often either potable or drinkable water, although either very filtered water. So it's quite high quality water, if I may. 2/3 of the new data centers that we have today are located in areas which actually right now already experience water stress. So there's direct competition of other resources, and it's a massive problem, as we know in the wash sector. And you also ask a question about waste. So yes, AI data centers produce electronic waste that contains substances like mercury. They can contain copper, aluminium, and more that contaminate the air, the water, and the soil. They're clearly not easy to recycle either. And a lot of the electronic waste actually ends up in landfills or in unofficially recycling sites. So yes, there are lots of issues regarding the waste produced by such data centers and the use of water to cool the systems and the GPUs. I hope this answered your question, but I'm happy to have this chat after the session by email in French, if you prefer. If you have any other question, and maybe Olivier, could you share your screen with the answers from the mentee?
Yep. And so you can go ahead and answer. What would you like to learn about more?
Interesting. The prompt. We actually had prepared a prompting exercise to help us all learn how to prompt better, but we always talk too much and we never have the time to actually go through this exercise.
Yeah.
But maybe this is a note for us to take, because we also organize session outside of this amazing mentoring program. So we can take this as a agenda point for the next session we will organize during the fall. Make
Yeah,
sure
and
to sorry.
we're going to design a prompt guide as well. We said we would publish one like specific for the wash
Right.
sector. So.
For those that use LinkedIn, I'll put in the chat the link to the Wash AI page, where you'll see all the information regarding our upcoming sessions and this prompting guide we want to write over the summer. Also, our email addresses will be on the next slide, so you're absolutely welcome to write to us.
But you can keep adding your ideas. I think we're just gonna, since we've hit time, I'm gonna stop sharing, but keep adding to we'll keep the Menti open if you want to share more ideas.
I saw one of the responses was about community usage, when use of Wash AI, where, I mean, it's not community because it's still Wash staff, but we're currently working with ACF on the field with the different desks and country headquarters. And the Wash AI is being used on the field, so maybe by the end of the year we'll have some concrete and significant results in order to, understand how it's being used on the field in the wash sector, and what we can learn from that for future uses and AI for wash. Maybe back to you, Alec. I think you have a few words at the end to conclude the session.
I think you're muted, Alex, or sorry, Alec, or your audio input is.
We cannot hear you, unfortunately. For those that have to leave us at right now because you have another session or a meeting, thank you for joining. So we're running a couple of minutes over. Still can't hear you, Alec. I'm sorry. Merci beaucoup, tous les francophones dans le chat. Merci. Yes, sounds good.
Thank you.
The Menti will be shared on WhatsApp, and I believe the session was recorded and will be published as well. So if you have some peers or friends or comrades from the wash sector that were not able to join, they can watch the recording. And yes, we'll be in touch for future sessions. Thank you everyone for joining. Olivier, do you have anything to add?
Nope, just thank you all for your questions, and yeah, we'll be in touch.
Sounds great. Thanks everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you everyone.
Thanks to the interpreters.
Bye.